Hello, everybody. Welcome to the international edition of Everything in Moderation. This is episode 6. What are we talking about today, gentlemen?
So
Lots of
today,
interesting stuff.
yeah, we're talking about some interesting stuff. We're talking about the perspectives of people internationally. So what I mean by that is we're gonna try to put ourselves in the shoes of people all around the globe. Specifically today, we're going to be focusing on China, Russia, maybe a little India, and who knows, we might go other places,
Wherever
but
the
we're trying to hit
conversation
all
goes.
the big main powers in the world.
I'll get started with Russia. So Vladimir Putin,
Yeah.
always the talk of the town, and when referring to Russia, especially in the media. What are our initial opinions of Putin?
Well,
Our own
my
opinions?
yeah, I would say my opinion on Putin is that he is a lot um, like charismatic leaders in Russian history. I mean, who comes behind or to mind like Stalin, but less serious. You
Mhm.
know, honestly, I would say Putin is an extremely smart and strategic leader, and I think that the reason why that is because of his KGB training and the fact that he's just a smart guy. You know, he knows how to rig systems. He's rigged his own, and Russia by this point is just used to his shenanigans because they've been there before. I mean, how many times? Countless times. Like that is Russian politics.
Yeah.
It's the nature of it. It's corruption. It's kind of weird seeing that, but that's the day to day. People live that. Citizens live in that. Citizens don't really care though.
Yeah. Um, Definitely coming out of the 90s, Russia endured a very hard economic time, and also just in general, life was hard. And Putin was kind of this shining ray of hope in his first term. And I mean, listen, like for what he's done for the country, he has, I think, at the very least, he has produced results. Like he took them from a broken state to a world power again. And I think that in terms of Danny, like you said, his KGB roots and strategically planning things, I think you have to credit that and at least give him credit for, bringing his country back into the fold.
Yeah, definitely. And then you also can attribute some victories from his people, his predecessors. Um, One big source of their political power, Russia's political power, is a pipeline that goes to Germany, which gives a lot of oil to all those countries. And without that, all those countries are underwater. They depend on Russia for this. And that's why, they can get away with things like annexing Crimea, like just traditional, imperialism, just going and taking over some land. We don't see that a lot anymore on the world stage. But, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in terms of the perspective of the Russian citizen, right? A lot of Russian citizens are extremely nationalist. What do I mean by that? You know how America we're very all right, salute to the flag, love our nation, love beer, love all that. Well, like they have it on another level. And it's not all Russians, obviously. There's like dissidents, but dissidents don't work out well in Russia. And we see that time and time again. So it it's mainly mostly nationalist people there, so they don't have a kind view on most outsiders and Westerners, and Russia in general doesn't take kind to the West, but like they're people, and they're not going to obviously be extremely mad at you if they meet an American or whatever. They could give less of a shit about like that kind of stuff. But when you meet nationalist Russians, it could be a different story. Just as Americans, if you're extremely nationalist, not on their level, but it could be the same way.
So
Yep.
it's kind of like an extreme view.
Yeah, it's a little more extreme. I want to take it like very far, you know.
Yeah, I just think that it's do you think that that comes from a nation that is, and like I always talk about like homogeneous societies. Russia is far from homogeneous, like what most people might mention. There is um very large Muslim communities like in Chechnya, Makhachkala, all those places, Dagestan. So they're far from homogeneous, but it's funny because like those like the Muslim communities are probably the ones that dislike the current regime the most. So
Yeah.
um it is, do you think that being like everyone being like Russian almost kind of helps with the nationalism thing? Like they're all united under like the same thing. Whereas like here you have like, oh, like I'm Italian American, I'm Mexican American, and so on and so forth,
Yeah. No, I'd say one of the most important things when it comes to both Russia and China and like this topic, especially, is that you have to realize we're capitalists, right? We live a whole different way than these people, kind of live. In Russia, they used to be communist, and that's their core values is communism, right? It may be less so today, as also is with China, but those values are ingrained in that country, and the people in that country have gone through a lot. You know, they're extremely strong, rigid people. You know, they don't care what you think of them. They're not very like soft, but that's the reason why they're so united and they can be nationalists at times because it's all for the motherland. It's all for Russia. That's why you don't have, you'd think that in a huge nation like Russia, all the people would revolt because there's a de facto dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
But these people don't care. They care about like Russia, the state. So that's what a lot of people. And that's why the majority of people believe in that, and that's why you don't see like too many dissidents in Russia.
So Dan, is it a pride thing or is it more of a self-interest thing that the government's doing better, so I'm gonna support the government in any way, or is it just because of history, like a cultural thing?
So like, imagine this, right? Your grandparents or great grandparents, right? They died because of being, being a dissident. And that happened all the time in Russia back in the day when it was the Soviet Union. You had KGB agents going door to door. So you grow up in a culture where, you don't want, the people don't want to be dissident because then they associate that with bad things, It's almost like Pavlov's dog with people over generations.
Yep.
They see something bad occur to one person because they told out. So that's happened on generation.
So I actually watched like a video prior to this filming, and I was like watching this video, and it was a British guy asking just Russian citizens like on the street, just walking up to them, being like what do you think about Putin? I would say about like 95% like of the people that he ran into were like, yeah, great, we love him.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not, and there's a lot of other factors that come into play. Like, where was he? Is that city like a Putin? Like, does it support Putin? That always has a bearing on it because like if you're in New Jersey, you're gonna find like more like Democrat left leaning people than if you were in Texas. So that's also a factor to take into play, but it's just in the sense that like there was rarely anyone who said something bad about him, and like comparing that to our own like elections and stuff, like if you ask like a bunch of people about like their opinion of Donald Trump, you're gonna get a 50-50 split decision. So
yeah, it's very like polarizing our politics, but theirs is just not very complicated at all.
No, it isn't. It's like very like before we started this, Danny actually mentioned that he was like, oh, like Russian presidents. It's like in the history of the leaders in the country, it's like largely just listen to what he says. It's not like our, I mean, they have a democracy. Like there are those things in place, but it seems like the president is the one who makes most of the.
Well, here's the thing: it's the same thing with China, right? It's a de facto democracy. I mean, China doesn't really try to even hide it. They're kind of just a.
So you also think that China has the same relationship with their citizens? That it's more about just an order
China's
situation?
different. China's different, and it's not even slightly. Do you guys want to move on to China just real quick?
I'm just gonna wrap up just two other things about Russia, and then we're good to go. So, since Putin's election in 2000, he did spend, I think, one term out of office. I can't remember when that was, but he's served I think he's served 4 terms already, maybe 5. And I think he put in a thing now where he could actually be president for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it's set.
So
he's been doing that. He's been slowly putting in clauses for himself and stuff. It's very funny to see on the outside. It's a little sad for the people there,
yeah.
but Russia or Russians rather, they didn't really care about that. And
yeah,
kind of put yourself in their shoes, then you can see that.
I mean, he has done positive change. Like he's not as, I think the West kind of paints him as a little crazier than he actually is. It's not like he's just like yeah, let me steal money from you. Yeah, let me kill you. That's not exactly. He has received criticism in recent years due to I think he changed the retirement age, made that higher, and then pension reforms made him a little made some Russian citizens a little annoyed. But for the most part, his approval rating has been pretty satisfactory throughout all of his terms. Never dipping below. I'm on status though right now. 63%. That's pretty healthy. That was in 2013. He had 63%, but then 2014, 80%. 2015, 85, 82, 82, 81, 81, 64, 69. So it's 69 in this current year. So
yeah. And also to put that in perspective, the reason why those numbers are so low during this period is specifically related to what was going on in Crimea at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And funny enough, the people in Crimea, they actually, a lot of them want to be Russian citizens.
Yep.
Now they are, because they got their papers and everything. And then there's a whole fight still going on there now, between nationalist Ukrainians and these Russians. And the nationalist Ukrainians are crazy, man. They have tats everywhere. They're like biker dudes, but more badass.
Just to understand Ukraine and how it's kind of situated is the western part of Ukraine is a more European way of living, and they speak Ukrainian. And while the east and the south are more, they lean more towards Russian and those ideals. So that's why the Russian invasion of Crimea was met with cheers almost, is because they speak Russian. Their ancestors are probably Russian, so they feel Russian. And you know what? That's how it goes. And I know Putin and Russia made a bridge in between Crimea and I think it was Rostov.
There is huge bridge.
Yeah, it's a huge bridge, but that's just to go to show you. I know that war has been going on since my junior year in high school. I'm a senior in college now, and that conflict is still going on, still not really talked about too much, but there you go. All right.
So what do you think? Oh, okay.
I mean, what question do you have?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what do you think then? If it's split in half, right, with one leaning European and the other one leaning Russian, just because there's a cultural attachment to it, like a cultural line there. They did invade. What are your opinions on it? Is it right to do that? Is it okay? I guess in one way, ethical.
I mean, the fact that you sent the army in first to annex it, personally, not a good idea. Not a good.
If we're talking about ethics, there's no ethics in war. So I feel like doing any kind of like imperial, like doing like anything like nation building, for example. I'm almost positive the reason why Putin really wanted Crimea is because it was a vacation spot for so many years, and he was like, you know what, fuck it, now it's mine again, you know. And he even sent like this like billionaire what do you call them, oligarchs, yeah, well, one of those guys, and he's setting up the infrastructure there to revamp the whole area, but that's yet to be seen.
I mean, it sits pretty on the Black Sea. It's a great,
yeah, that's what I mean.
Place
There's a whole
trade.
Vacation spot right there.
Great place for trade, obviously too. And
yeah,
in terms of like Russia going to acquire it, yeah, it makes sense. I think that, you know, Ukraine's not really one to kind of, I mean, Ukraine in the past years, obviously with the Russian aggression and whatnot, have pursued a more European ties. But you know, like maybe if Russia was like, all right, listen, like, you know, all of your people in Crimea are they kind of feel like they're Russian, like, and how about you take a vote and see if like they want to be part of Russia? And you know, then I think that could have been a little better, but Ukraine would have said no, fuck off, you know. Like that probably.
Yeah, I don't think they would have went for that.
So I don't really think that Putin and Russia's military saved Crimea. I don't think there was anything really going on there. There was no abuse from the Ukrainian government to make them want to feel. It was just cultural ties.
I mean, they just pulled at us and they got all the nationalists there, and then they had them go in. I mean, we did the same thing with the Afghanistan government.
It makes you wonder. It's like, all right, if you feel so strongly to Russia, why don't you just go to Russia? I mean, many of those people might not have the money to obviously afford that, but you know, that's another issue. China, let's go.
So what was the initial question you asked me, Lewis, about China? Do you remember? If not, I can.
Not exactly, but well, actually, no. We were transitioning by. Is it the same situation in China as in Russia, right? So one was that Russia is more about order, and China, is it the same thing or is it different?
Okay, so China is a little different because, you know, the whole situation in China is different than Russia for the people, right? So, and it really depends on where you are. So mainland China right now, you know, they're almost all for communism. Like communism, now how we talk about communism, and like it's thought based, we're like it's almost, you know, the big red scare and stuff like that. Like we're very scared of it. They're like gung ho about it, like we are about capitalism. The young generation is as well, and that's on mainland China. So they're all for it, and the reason why that is because, yes, they have a form of communism where the government controls, you know, all these factors of business, but it can still work effectively the way that China has it currently now, and that's why they are a very rich state, especially in production.
It's like we can't get it confused that like it, as much as like China does have elements of a command economy, it's still like market based. Because I like one of my friends told me the other day. He was like a kid in our like group chat or whatever was like, oh, like China communism, and they're like, oh, like buy this like Chinese stock, and it's like, okay, well, China's clearly not communist. If you could buy a stock, the Chinese
that's
stock.
A lot of people don't realize that. Like, yes, kind of. It's almost an evolution, right? When the markets came in, where China was like, all right, we play ball game or we're done, you know, and that's where, you know, the Middle East couldn't do it just because it was against a lot of people's religion. China did it because they needed to, and they you know, they were a powerhouse at the time. So they
I
just
mean,
need
like
to-
I've mentioned this on the podcast before that China was like the second poorest nation in the world at some point,
Yeah.
and that was probably under its more communist, by the book communism, and
Yeah, because the more closer you follow, like that doctrine, when it, in today's markets at least,
yes,
and then too, if you follow extremely, it's just going to lead to bad stuff because it's you're blocking trade,
yes,
and it really just isn't good for your economy. But just to go back to the perspectives that Chinese people have, so yeah, that's the mainland view. There is little distance, but it's almost like Russia, where it's like 5%. Then you go to Hong Kong, and it's a whole different ballgame. The people in Hong Kong enjoy the freedoms that they have there, and it's part of the one of the reasons why like China, or at least that area, like it's great to visit, is because it's a lot like here,
Mhm.
except like you can't talk about certain things. um, but that area has had a history of just like crazy stuff happen there. Like for example, you ever heard of the Tiananmen Square massacre?
Mhm.
So that was a whole bunch of students, and they were protesting the government at the time because a beloved leader who was a communist technically was doing more liberal policies, like when it came to like certain things in media, and then certain things in government as well. So they were taking like a more democratic approach to communism at the time, and then the guy died, and then a new leader came in, and he's back to the old stuff, and then all these students extremely mad, protesting outside Tiananmen Square for months. It goes on, it goes on. Eventually, Chinese soldiers just massacred them all. So there's huge amount of distance now in the area, but it's really closed off of that area. So that's why you're seeing protests constantly, or you used to before really COVID happened, and the Chinese government kind of got around that.
Who was the president during Tiananmen Square? You know?
I'm not completely sure.
Okay.
During what again?
You'd probably
Uh,
have to look up the date. Um,
Deng Xiaoping. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
sounds familiar.
Yeah, I just looked it. I just looked it up right now. Um, okay. So, yeah,
their
go ahead.
transition to a more capitalistic market has led to their success, right? That's what you're trying to say, Danny, right?
Yeah,
So
it was moreover they had to, but don't get it wrong. Yes, they have a market system, but it's not
it's not
capitalism
the same. Yeah, I know,
because
but it's
people can't go on the endeavors that they were. Like if you were to try to do business in China, you'd be like, what is happening here? Like it's almost all corruption based and all about politics. It's really weird.
so the government has ties within the corporations. Is there in a way,
All of
right?
them are tied. Every single thing is tied. That's why there was so much controversy over TikTok, because that has a ByteDance, which is a Chinese company, which is owned in Hong Kong. But even in Hong Kong, government still
There's strong
stands there
ties.
in that area.
A big one too is Huawei. Huawei was like with the 5G scandal. I remember that
Yeah.
like a couple. I think that was like during the summer. I was hearing about that, and then like now you see like Verizon rolled out their 5G and stuff. So like I don't know. I didn't really know like the actual like workings of like the controversy with that, but yeah, it could just be like an American jealousy thing. They're like, oh, like China got the 5G first.
China has 6G in prototype. We don't even have a full 5G network, but that's getting off topic.
This isn't a technology podcast, but we will get there at some point. It's relevant.
Just let it rip with me. I'll talk about technology all day.
So, yeah, it is. I mean, we talked about this in like one of the regular episodes of Everything in Moderation. We did, like it was in the socialism episode, and we were talking about like what state capitalism is, and like a lot of people argue that China is a state capitalist country. But again, you can't really assign like names to these like economic systems because no one's never 100%. It's always mixed bag a little bit.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
know, at that point, people need to start realizing that more. The old versions of or anything that's happened before do not apply today. Like when people always like are like yelling about socialism, like you don't even know what socialism is if you think they're following strict, like by the book, old school socialism. Everything is new. Even, you know, the modern day politics, people in politics right now, and all fronts, like almost every single country, it evolves every single like 10, 15 years. So you really need to keep that in mind, especially, you know, in other countries, because it's hard to conceptualize it in other countries because it's not as close in your face as it is in America, but it happens over there as well.
I mean, we always talk about how like things are not black and white. There is no such thing as a fully uh, socialist state right now, and even there is no fully capitalist state. Too, everyone says, "Oh, capitalism destroyed America." You know,
So,
like literally, Social Security is like a socialist type thing.
so I
So
just want to clarify for like
yes,
the people watching. We wanted to talk about the perspectives, right? Like we wanted to see what the perspective of the Chinese people is on the Chinese government, right? So what would be that perspective? What would be like our finalized answer from all of our thoughts that we were like talking about?
Uh, for
Would it be a
me,
thumbs
at
up?
least, China is definitely a mixed bag. Where mainland is a lot like Russia, as I said before, where it's a lot of people completely believing in the government. The government there is different, as there are new leaders, but they all follow the strict, you know, government protocol. There's small changes sometimes, um, but you know, I don't see it getting any better or changing, at least there. So mainland, most people agree with the government. They hate the United States, at least people that are nationalists, like I said. You know, people generally aren't going to hate another country unless they directly invade them, um, or people from another country, uh, unless they are more nationalist, and then that's because they're almost isolated. They want to be isolated from other countries. You know, America used to be like that, but I wouldn't say so
In,
anymore.
in my head, I'm thinking about it. China has improved economically, right, over the years. So even if the government is involved in a lot of things, right, those benefits that you get, right, those that economic growth and economic development just throughout the whole entire country, it doesn't really matter exactly how the government's being run as long as it's benefiting you in a way, right? Because that's what
Yeah, you
capitalism
know,
is in a way.
that's a great point. So if the citizens are going to be happy if all of them are either are in good conditions, living conditions, are used to the state of living that they are, which in this is basically in the case of Russia in certain areas. Um, you know, it really depends on like the individual's happiness. And if you're a powerful nation, you're inherently going to be able to give your citizens, you know, a decent quality of living. Well, in some cases, not so much in China, but they handle most of their basic needs. You know, they're not going to be overly mad at this nation, but it also depends on certain other feelings of the individual person as well, or like where they lean like politically in that country, you know.
Also, I don't know how if it's changed or not, but from the last time that I searched up on China, just did a little bit more research on them, the majority, the concentration of their population is usually on the coast, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the rest of China basically is just rural, right?
Yeah, it's very weird. So from just an IT perspective, real quick, um, imagine China and Lightstar Networks, the mainland China, like where like all the farming and stuff happens. They're living in like 100 years back, like nothing
Definitely.
happening,
So,
no networks, no computer service, no cell service, nothing. And then
so
they have this clustered area, and then they have the coast. All those have networks.
I also feel like that's a factor as well, and just the satisfaction people see in the government. Because are those people that do live in those rural areas being counted for? Are they really?
So
You know?
yeah, so that's a good point, because that's the reason why they are like that, where they're almost completely for communism, because they don't have a horrible life,
Mhm.
because it's not like North Korea. They can get such like food. They're like, a lot of them are farmers. They can like live life and be okay. But they're just not really. I really don't know to say it. They just don't get a lot of information
Mhm.
at all.
That might be
And
a good thing.
that's primarily the reason why they're not very dissident with their government.
I
Because
actually wanted to go over like a couple like indexes that kind of rank China to see where it leaves. So in terms of the economic freedom index, this is a good one. I always look at this like as the year goes on, but China is 103 out of 180. So comparing
Is
it
one being
to
the best?
what?
Is one being the best?
Yes. So actually, Hong Kong is 2, and Singapore is 1. So okay, we got that. World Corruption Index, China is 80 out of 198. Okay. And then I actually wanted to, since we were talking about citizens, I took out the World Happiness Index, and China has a 5.12 out of 10. So
We also have to.
it came out ranked as 92 out of 150 countries, whereas like the Finland, Denmark, and other European countries rank towards the top. We have 2 minutes, by the way, so whatever you say. What were you
I was
gonna
going to say that when you check those indexes, well, indices actually, I think, right?
Yes.
Okay, when you check those indices, what you have to do is just take into consideration the definition they use for those type of terms. Like happiness, it's a very abstract term. You really can't measure it. So exactly what's going into like their actual algorithm to figure out the actual score for that country.
For
And
that,
two, for that, oh yeah.
sorry, for that at least, like I was gonna do the approval ratings, but they did not have published approval ratings. So, like of Xi Jinping.
And then two, for corruption, is it one being the cleanest or is it most corrupt? Because I was looking on one and one was most corrupt, and the bigger the number, the least corrupt it was.
The bigger the number, the more corrupt it was.
All right. And how is that relating to the United States? Did it say like the ranking of the United States compared to China?
United
we're
States
in yellow.
Yeah, it was in
That's what I know.
50s.
Yeah.
All right. We will have to wrap this one up, but there was a lot of good conversation today, a lot of good facts. Hope you all got something good out of it. We certainly did. And next week, we'll be talking to you about Hispanics and Hispanic culture in the United States and beyond. So
excited about that. I'm
Yeah,
already
let's go.
questioning people about this.
All right.
I'll be asking the questions though.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Have a good week.
All right.
Ta-ta.
See ya.
Perfect. See you guys.